Hi class, in this video we're going to go over chapter 33, so aggregate demand, aggregate supply. Now this is the economy on the really big picture now. So we learned about supply demand in the previous chapters, but those are supply demand for individual good, individual service on one market of the economy. But now look at the entire economy now. So something called an aggregate demand and an aggregate supply. So for the demand supply of everything. All right, so first couple reviews. So know that we have this thing called business cycle. So economy fluctuate from year to year. This is very normal. And then every time the economy goes down, so we have an economic contraction. So economy slows down. That's called a recession. And then anytime you have a economy getting better, going up, that's called economic expansion. And then the difference between recession and then depression. That a depression is a more severe recession. So usually your recession is defined as a 6 months economic downturn. So real GDP goes down for 6 months. That's called recession. And then depression is when you have 12 months. So for the entire year, the GDP goes down. That's called depression. Okay. So far we had only one depression in history. That was the Great Depression. But recession happens every 5 to 7 years. So recession is very normal. It happens all the time. So a couple of key facts about this economic fluctuation. So all follows this thing called a business cycle. It's very irregular. So even though it does follow a cycle, but how long the cycle is very irregular. Sometimes you might have a 5-year cycle. Sometimes you might have a 10-year cycle. Sometimes maybe a 15-year cycle. But 15 years is very rare. So mostly it's somewhere from 5 to 10-year cycle. Okay. So it's called business cycle when the economy goes up and down. But if you look at the business cycles, there are still things goes hand in hand. So there's still many of the economic indicators will move together. So factors such as your real GDPs, which is the output, your unemployment rate, and then sometimes your inflation will be in there too. So many of the economic indicators will move hand in hand when you have this fluctuations in the economy. So if you look at our graph over here, so this shows you our real GDP in the economy from 1970 to 2015. So anytime you see this highlighted area, that's when you have a recession. So this is so from 1982 to 1991, that's a 9-year cycle. And the next one from 91 to almost 2001, 2002, that's a 11-year cycle. And the next one you have 02 to 08, that's your 6-7-year cycle. And then this one we don't know when the next one is yet. Okay, so this cycle happens. It's very normal. When it happens, is anytime you have this lower in real GDP, that's called a recession. Okay, so if you look at our investment, now remember your GDP has 4 components: your consumption, investment, government spending, and net export. Even though they all tend to move with recession, but this investment component move really hand in hand with our real GDP, because investment is the most volatile component in the real GDP. Government spending is most stable, but investment is most volatile. So for investment, anytime you have a recession, you see how the investment goes down by a lot when you have a recession. It's more visible decrease in investment. That's also a sign of a recession. Okay, and another one you can look at our unemployment rate. During recession, your unemployment rate always tend to increase, and it really does, because if you look at all these recessions here, so the 08 recession, the Great Recession, the 01, the bubble burst for the tech companies, 1991, the brief recession, and then 81, 82, and then 80s and 1970s. So anytime you see this recession, you always see this increase in our unemployment rate. And that's one key factor that we can know that we have actually recession going on. So two variables: real GDP and then unemployment rate. They both as an indicator of the economy, how good the economy is. Now, a little review from previous chapters. Know the difference between know what is called classical dichotomy. So this says that there's a difference between your nominal variable and a real variable. And then from classical dichotomy, we had this monetary neutrality. So it just says your nominal variable does not impact your real variable. Now, put another way, it just says how much money you have in the money supply will not impact your real GDP in the long run. So in the long run, real GDP, how much stuff you produce, depends on how much resource you have, how much labor you have, how much technology you have, but it doesn't depend on money. Doesn't depend on how much money you have. So by just changing your money supply wouldn't change your real GDP. That's called a monetary neutrality. And I believe this is back in chapter, again, this depends on different textbook you have, either chapter 17 or chapter 29, I believe. So those chapters, if you're not sure about these two definitions, go back in and then look at it, okay? All right, so the classical dichotomy is true in the long run. So in the long run, that there is a separation between real and nominal variables. That if you're just changing your nominal variables, just changing how much money you have, wouldn't impact how much your real GDP, your unemployment rate, and other factors are. So one example you can think about Zimbabwe. Now, we talked about Zimbabwe before, right? So remember in Zimbabwe, back in 2008, everybody was a billionaire. So everybody had more money. But it didn't mean the economy was already doing good. They're still suffering, they're still poor. So there's this separation between our monetary unit and then the real unit. Now, however, in the short run, your monetary supply, your money supply does have an impact on the real variables, does have impact on the real GDPs. So in the short run, that between your nominal variables and real variables, they are connected deeply. So think of a situation like this. Imagine that we give everybody more money today. So imagine we give everybody in America $1 million. Now, what they're going to do with the money? They're going to buy stuff, right? So giving everybody $1 million, consumption will increase. When consumption increases, this also causes our investment to increase as well. And that will increase your aggregate demand curve. We haven't talked about this yet, but that will increase the overall demand in the economy, right? Remember, the real GDP has 4 components. So consumption, investment, government spending, and net export. So if you just give everybody more money, that will increase this consumption component and the investment component in our real GDP. So that will cause a change in the economy. Okay, so in the short run, they are connected deeply. In the long run, not so much anymore. So because they're connected deeply in the short run, we can use this information to draw a new model. It's called an AD-AS model. AD stands for aggregate demand, and then AS stands for aggregate supply. So when it says aggregate demand, that just means demand of everything. And then the aggregate supply, it's just a supply of everything in the economy. So most economy use the AS-AD model to explain the short-term fluctuations in the economy. So you can see when there's a recession going on, when there's an expansion going on. So for the AD model, for the AD curve shows the demand of all goods and services in the economy by all factors in the economy. So your household, your firms, your government, your consumers overboard, or your consumer board, so everybody overseas. So all those 4 components, they are part of our aggregate demand curve. Now, if you notice, look at this carefully, what this one says. Household, right? That's your consumption. Firms, that's your investment. Government spending, and then your people overseas, net export, right? So the 4 components for your aggregate demand curve are also the 4 components for GDPs. They're the same thing. Okay, so there are everybody who want to buy the stuff at different price level. And then for AD curve, it's just like regular demand curve, will be downward sloping. Okay. Now for the aggregate supply curve, so this is the supply of all the goods and services in the economy. Now for this, this will be upper sloping because of the profit motive. So if you graph your AS-AD curve, it looks like this. Then notice on the vertical axis, it says price level. That is the price of everything, right? Because remember, in the old supply demand curve, on the vertical axis, it was only the price, right? But the price was only for one good, one service. But now you have a price level, which is the good and service, which is the price for all goods and services. And on the horizontal axis, we have quantity. But this quantity is for everything. So this is also known as the real GDP. which is the quantity of everything in the economy. And then the intersections you have, you determine what is the price level for the economy and what's the output level for the economy. Okay, so again, this is on the bigger picture now, so not just one good, one services. This is all the good, all the services. And then this is the price level for everything, not just one price. Now, the four components for for aggregate demand curve, your consumption, investment, government spending, and net export, will determine the shape of your aggregate demand curve. So they're known as the wealth effect, which is on the consumption, interest effect on the investment, exchange rate effect on the net export, and then but for the last one, for government purchase, we're assuming government purchase is independent for the price level. That for our governments, when they go buy stuff, they don't care about how much the stuff is. They just buy what the government need. So government spending is independent price level. So government spending is fixed by the policy. So it wouldn't change when the price change. But these three components here, this will change when the price level changes. And because of these three factor changes, that will determine the shape or the direction of the aggregate demand curve. Now, first one is consumption. So imagine this is called the wealth effect. So it just says that as the price level changes, it will change the value of the wealth people hold on to. So imagine how much money you have in your pocket is fixed. So let's say you have $100, and then let's say that there is a decrease in the price level. So everything in the market is cheaper, and you still have your $100. So are you better off or are you worse off? You are better off, right? Because now you can buy more stuff. So you still only have $100, but everything is cheaper now, so price level is lowered. Then you can buy more stuff. So in that case, consumer become more wealthy or wealthier. We can increase our consumer spending, which means at a lower price level, consumption will increase. Okay, and then vice versa, if you have a higher price level, consumption will decrease with a higher price level. All right, so that's a wealth effect. Now, number two is an interest rate effect. Now, for this interest rate effect, think about the money you have on your hand. So money on hand versus money in the bank account. All right, so if the price level is lowered, so everything becomes cheaper. Now, in that case, we're going to need less money on hand now. Because everything becomes cheaper, we don't need that much cash anymore. Now, if it's vice versa, if everything is very expensive, then you do need more cash on hand, right? But now everything's cheaper, we need less cash on hand. Now, what you do with the actual cash you have, you don't need to put on hand anymore. You put in your account, right? So money in the account become more, and that will increase the amount of money in the bank, which means it will lower the interest rate. So if you look at the money supply demand curve, it's very similar to what you've seen before. So demand curve goes like this, it's money demand, and then money supply goes like this. That's a vertical line going up. Again, this goes back to chapter 18. So if the price level goes lower, we're holding less cash on hand, and therefore we're going to have more money in the account. That will increase your money supply curve to the right. So that will give you a lowered interest rate. So because more money available to lending, more money supply in the economy, that will lower interest rate. Lower interest rate, companies will borrow more money. Because at a lower interest rate, make the company's project more profitable. They'll borrow more money, and then investment will increase. And when investment increases, your real GDP also increases. Okay, that's called interest rate effect. So think about the money on hand and also money in the account. And next one is our exchange rate effect. So this is a comparison between your US price and then the world price. So if your US price is lower, that means everything at home is cheaper now. That will make your interest rate goes lower. So interest rate is cheaper. And then at the same time, also make your dollar depreciate. So it means your dollar is worth less now. Once dollar is worth less, that means everything produced in America is cheaper, then our net export will increase. And when net export increases, that will increase your real GDP as well. Okay, so this is your comparison between the domestic price and the world price. So if your domestic price is cheaper, then we're going to sell more overseas. So our net export will increase. So because of the consumption, the wealth effect, the interest rate on the investment, and then the exchange rate effect on your net export, that these three components here make sure that your aggregate demand curve is downward sloping between your price level and then real GDP. Okay, real GDP. All right. So when you have a decrease in the price level, that will cause an increase in the quantity demanded for aggregate demand curve. But when there is an increase in price level, so everything becomes more expensive, that will cause a decrease in the quantity of goods and services in the economy. But this price level change, it's just like before, you're moving on the same demand curve, so you're not shifting the line. You only shift the line whenever these four components change. So whenever you have an actual change in consumption, changing investment, government purchase, or net export, these four changes here, you are shifting the line. But if only the price level change, then you're moving on the same demand curve. You don't shift the line. But when these four changes increase, you go to the right. A decrease, you are going to the left. Okay. So for changing consumption, there are only consumption-specific variables factors that can change in consumption. So event that changes how people want to consume at different price levels. So this can be how much tax they pay, how much wealth they have, and also there's one more that's listed in your book that's not mentioned in the PowerPoint. It's your consumer confidence. They can also change your consumption. That's usually a big part of our consumption shifter. So increasing consumption spending would increase your aggregate demand curve to the right. Now for investment, this is investment specific. So anything to do with policy, anything to do with the money supply interest rate, anything to do with technology, that's only affecting investment, that was shifting investment curve. That was shifting the AD curve. So if investment is increasing, AD to the right, investment decreasing, AD to the left. Okay, and then guys, usually when you read the questions in your test, also on the homeworks, whichever component will cause the AD curve to shift is usually very, very obvious. So in the question, we usually mention, so let's suppose consumers change behavior, or let's suppose business gets something new, right? So they always give you little hints here and there, so you know which component change that is. All right, and then next for government purchase, this is whenever government spend more money, you also cause a change in the aggregate demand curve. So increase again to the right, decrease to your left. And last one, your net export. So this will be factors specific for overseas market. So information such as exchange rate change. This can be recession in Europe. This can be maybe economic growth in other countries. Have them buy more of our stuff. That will cause a change in our aggregate demand curve too. Now, for the next two slides is basically a summary of everything we just said. So if you guys have time, you can go over, read all this little fine print here and there. Okay. All right. So next, for aggregate supply curve, you're gonna see two different aggregate supply curve. The first one is called a long run aggregate supply curve, which is vertical. And then there's also a regular aggregate supply curve, which is upward sloping. So for the long run aggregate supply curve, it's just vertical. So just very straight vertical line. And the reason why that is, think of this long run aggregate supply curve as your PPF, the production possibility frontier. So when you're on the line, you're producing the potential production for the economy. So how much you can produce in potentially. Now, can you go beyond that in the short span of time, you can, but not for long, right? So imagine if you have your boss ask you, says, hey, can you work 40 hours a week 40 hours next week? And you say, yes, I can work 40 hours. But what if your boss asks you, hey, can you do maybe double that to 80 hours a week? Well, maybe yes, maybe no, right? Depends on how much the pay is. But imagine your boss says, hey, I want you to work 80 hours a week for the next 2 years. Then we cannot do that, right? So it's possible to work more, to work beyond your potential just for the short span of time, but not for long. That eventually it all goes back to your potential. So how much you can work in a week, like 40 hours a week. So for this potential output here, this is your full employment output. So this is assuming that everybody is all employed. So there's zero cyclical unemployment, but you still have your frictional and then your structural unemployment. So a full employment output, that means everybody who want a job pretty much have a job now. The economy producing at a full potential. So you have this vertical aggregate supply curve. Now this will shift anytime you have a change in labor, change in capital, change in natural resources, and change in technology. Now, doesn't this sound very similar to what you learned before for the PPF, right? So the same shift for, not PPT, PPF, the same shift for PPF are the same shift for your long-run aggregate supply curve. So if it's increasing, you're just shifting to the right. So more labor, more capital, more resources. If it's decreasing, then you're just shifting to the left. That's a decreasing. Okay. So change in labor. This can be the change in quantity of labor. So getting more people in the economy. This can also change your natural rate of unemployment. So imagine the natural rate changes. By the way, right now we have very low natural rate of unemployment. So right now we're at about 4%. So that's a very low rate. Okay. And then next, changing capital. So you have more technology, more physical capitals. So more machines, more buildings, more tools, those will change your capital. Now this also measures your human capital. So if you have better quality of labor, that will change your capital as well. Okay, so not just the physical capital, but also human capital as well. So the quality of labor, not just quantities. And then changing natural resources. So if you have discovered more, let's say more gold, more oil, or you might have a weather event. So let's say right now in California, there's a huge wildfire in California. There will be a decreasing in the natural resources. Okay, so all this can cause impact on aggregate supply curve. And the technology, such as new technology for labor, for capitals, make everything produced more efficiently. That's technology. Okay, your international trade, so this would be tariff, your other stuff. Your government regulations can also have an impact on aggregate supply curve too. But those you see less often. Most likely it's your your labor, capital, natural resources, and technology. All right. So your long run, in the long run, both the aggregate demand curve and the long run aggregate supply curve can shift. So if you shift them together, this usually happens when you have a technology change. When you have a monetary policy change, this will cause the AD curve to the right. By the way, monetary policy change, you're going to have a chapter dedicated on this in the later, I think chapter 34, 35. It's whenever the government, the Federal Reserve, change the money supply over time. That's a monetary policy. So if you have both AD and a long run aggregate supply curve change, you can have continuous growth in output, so continuous increase in real GDP, and also continuous inflation, so price level keep going higher, higher, higher. So this looks a little messy. Okay, so let me show what happens. So we start with the blue line. So that's the long run aggregate supply curve and the aggregate demand curve in 1990s. And then we change both. So by 2000, we have more computers. we have more technologies and more capitals. So that would shift your long run aggregate supply curve to the right. At the same time, we have more money supply. So that would change your aggregate demand curve to the right too. So we have a new intersection. Now at the new intersection, we'll have a higher output than before. We also end up with a higher inflation than before. Now keep going. By 2010, we have more capitals again, and also more money supply. We have more output than before. So 2010 produced more than 2000. At the same level, we have at the same time we have more price level as well. So higher price level, high inflation. So if you change both at the same time, then you're gonna have both the real GDP and the inflation increase at the same time. So in the short run, you're gonna see a difference here, because in the short run, let me use my OneNote. That's probably better to show the graph. Okay, so your long run aggregate supply curve is vertical. Your short run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping. Now the difference between long run and short run is the time difference. Long run is usually assuming that there's no fixed cost, so all the prices are flexible. But in the short run, you have some fixed expenses. So one idea we have in economics is the sticky wage theory. So sticky wage says wage is slow to adjust. All right, now if you guys remember, the goal for any company is to maximize profit. Now profit equals to revenue minus cost. Now let's suppose we have a company that the only cost we have is labor. So now you have the price times quantity, that's give you revenue, and minus the cost of labor, so labor cost. Now let's suppose in our economy that our labor cost is sticky, so slow to adjust, sticky wage, but price, the stuff we sell, are flexible. So this can be represented if you guys go to the gas station, look at the gasoline price. Gasoline price is flexible, right? It changes all the time. But how much they pay the employees in the gas station are very steady. Their pay doesn't change every day or every week. It's usually they change about like maybe once every 3 months, or maybe once a year when the employee does good. So when the wage doesn't change, and then your price changes, we got a problem here. So imagine the price goes higher, and then we're assuming quantities are the same. So price goes higher, that will increase your revenue. When you increase your revenue, your costs stay the same, which means your profit will go up as well. Now, once that happens, when cost goes up, then companies want to produce more of it. So quantity supplied will be increased because the profit is higher. However, this is only good in the short run. That in the long run, the wage become flexible too. So flexible wages in the long run. So now when the wage goes higher along with prices, so price increases, wage goes higher too. So everything goes up, then your profit might not change at all. So you go back to where it was before. So if you look at this long run supply curve, so I have a short run aggregate supply curve. This is the price level, and then real GDP. All right, so let's call this one Y1. This is Y2. All right, so imagine this is where the economy should be at. So we're at Y1. Now, next month, economy does very, very good. We'll go to Y2. Now, at Y2, wage stay the same. So company profit goes higher. At a higher profit, company will produce more of the good. So production supplied increases. But however, to increase supplied, we need to hire more labor. Now, hire more labor, that means now the firms will compete. Firms will compete for workers. When firms compete for workers, your wage will increase. Now, when wage increase, you wouldn't produce at this point anymore. Because when wage increases, you now have a lower output level because cost goes higher, right? So cost goes higher, then you go back to where it was before. So you go back to this point right here. Okay. So if you draw this line, this is your long run aggregate supply curve. That will capture the potential output. So it's possible to go over that just a little bit in the short run. But in the long run, once the wage adjusts, you go back to the long run aggregate supply curve. So that's why this is the long run supply curve, but this is only the short run supply curve. So you can possibly produce more in the short run, but once wage become adjusted, wage become flexible, you go back to where it was before. Okay. All right. So we talk about that. Okay, we mentioned this before too. Oh, so some changes that can shift your short-run supply curve. There are labor, capital, and natural resources. This will be changes for short-run. So anything can change your long-run curve, can also change your short-run curve. But there are also some short-run specific factors. So anything happen to the price of resource, there will be a short run change. That wouldn't shift your long run, but they'll only shift your short run. Okay, so anything shifting long run can shift your short run, but there are some short run specific changes. And then, by the way, the most often one you will see is the change of oil price. So oil price increase or decrease, that will cause a change in short run supply curve. All right, so for our economic fluctuations, let me show you what it looks like with a example. So for short-run fluctuations, so let's draw the aggregate demand curve, aggregate supply curve. So long-run aggregate supply, aggregate demand, and then short-run. We have our original price level. Let's call it P1. The original Y output level, Y1. Okay. Now, let's suppose something changes. Let's suppose that our aggregate demand curve consumption goes down. So consumption goes down. So consumption decreases. That will decrease your aggregate demand curve to the left. So AD2. At AD2, this is our new output, and this is our new price level. Now, notice that the new output is less than before, right? So now, whenever you're on the left side of your long aggregate supply curve, this is recession. That means economy slows down. Now, when economy slows down, you have high unemployment rate. So unemployment also increases, and then lower real GDP. So real GDP decreases. Now, if it's shifting to the right, so let's say your investment increases, that will cause your AD curve to shifting to the right. So AD3. Shifting to the right, we have a new real output. Let's call this Y3. So Y3 is more than Y1, so we have a more output than before. This is expansion or economic growth. That means economy getting better or very good. Okay. Whenever you guys study the intermediate economic class, Didn't go over more of this in details about how different curves shift and different long-term adjustment. You don't have to know that now. Just know that to the left here is recession. To the right here, that's expansion. Okay, that means it's producing more than before. And also, if you look at it vertically, anywhere above this, that's inflation, because that's the inflation area. Anywhere below this is a deflation area. All right, so let's get this. You guys can read the stories on your own. It's not that important for this. All right, so whenever you have a shifting aggregate supply, let me show you one more shift. That's a demand shift. So let's say we have a shifting aggregate supply curve. So long run aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply, and aggregate demand curve. So let's suppose we have a decrease in aggregate supply curve. There'll be shifting to the left. So SRAS2. Now shifting to the left, we have a new output level, Y2, and this is Y1. Notice it's less than before again, and it's also to the left. That's a recession. Also, if you notice, the price level changed too, right? So this is P1, this is P2, so price level increases. So this is actually have a special name for it. We have both recession and high inflation going on. This is called stagflation. Okay, so if you guys read a history book, there's a whole chapter on stagflation in 1970s. All right, let me see what else I need to talk about. I think that's it. All right, so that's it for this chapter. So guys, have any question, let me know. Okay, good luck. Bye-bye.